Maybe you can give us a little sneak peek about what some of the changes might be and how they might impact physicians in practice.
Some of the sneak peek pieces I can share with you now are that we're, first of all, looking to decrease the number of credits.
No, I don't think anyone will complain about that.
No, I don't think so.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hat Rack. I'm Bill McCauley, the Associate Dean of Continuing Professional Development at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry. And with me is my colleague, Leslie McAdam.
Hi.
How are you?
Nice to see you again.
It's always a pleasure. And the Hat Rack is a podcast for physicians in practice to help them to learn a little bit about how to best implement CME into their practice so that they can make changes in their practice. And we have another guest with us this week who's quite knowledgeable about CME and continuing professional development. There's some changes in the way that people are referred to these terminologies, continuing professional development versus CME. What's your preferred term, Leslie?
Well, since I'm part of continuing professional development, I like the CPD term.
Okay.
But I'm open to the CME term.
A lot of physicians in practice talk about CME. That's what they talk about. And so what we do at CPD is we differentiate what we do as CME being continuing medical education, those activities that help people to learn and incorporate changes into practice. And then we also do faculty development. So we find as part of professional development that maybe not applicable to all physicians. Anyway, our guest today is Kate Marsden from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, and Kate is the Associate Director of Learning and Strategy. Welcome, Kate. And we invited Kate because we wanted to, she's involved substantially in the MOC, the Maintenance of Certification Program through the Royal College. And this episode is going to be a bit more interest to specialists probably because we're going to be talking about the MOC program, which is the program that you have to participate in if you are a specialist practicing in Canada for the most part.
Yeah. I'm definitely interested in the MOC program or the Maintenance of Certification Program. Kate, can you give us a background about it? How did it even start?
Absolutely. So back when we were just twinkles in someone's eyes in 1975, the Royal College started to look at what was needed with respect to CME and supporting specialists. So there was a conversation about whether a recertification exam would be the way to go, and our board voted against that and recommended having a CPD program in collaboration with the National Specialty Societies, so looking at supporting specialists on that front. So it started to evolve from there, and in the later 80s, it became a full-on CPD system, and it was called the Maintenance of Competence Program, which some people may remember as MOCOMP. And there were sort of through the early 90s, which I refer to as the MOCOMP years, we were looking at expanding and evaluating that program, seeing what it needed to, look like. And by the end of the 90s, it became mandatory actually to participate in. And it moved from MOCOMP to Maintenance of Certification or MOC program. So through the early 2000s is when we were launching that in 3 phases. It looked a little different at that time. And 2011 is really when it came into being as the program that many people are familiar with today, the 3 sections, the main party portfolio. And of course, remain mandatory in order to maintain your fellowship with the Royal College and use your FRCPC or FRCSC designation.
Right. So those 3 sections are self-learning, group learning, and assessment, I think, at this point.
That's correct,
right?
yes.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. Oh, 1975. I didn't realize the whole concept went back that far. That's a long time.
But really, this one, so the 3 levels, have they ever changed since, 2011 that started?
2011 is when we came to 3, and actually prior to that, it was 6 sections. So 2011 was the major shift, coming from 6 sections to 3 with the need to simplify and really focus in. So I know you were talking about earlier CME and CPD and the differentiation of the terms. So for the Royal College, I think it started with sort of the focus on CME and really the medical, and that was defined more as sort of your medical knowledge. And then as we were working through the CanMeds, our CanMeds framework and the roles and so on, there was more of that movement towards CPD. So really thinking about the physician as a professional and all the roles that a physician might play. So that then translated to the CPD program as, maybe the 6 sections are maybe a little bit too much. How about the 3 sections that really focus on those main areas that cover physician as a professional?
Okay, so you already mentioned that in 2000 and I
11.
can't remember what year it became mandatory.
Oh, the mandatory. Yeah, it became mandatory in 1999, actually.
1999. Yeah. Okay, so it became mandatory, and most of the provincial regulatory authorities now are requiring physicians to participate in the Royal College or the CFPC's program. There are some slight differences, but most of the regulatory authorities require that. So I think what a lot of specialists might not understand is how is it tracked, and what happens if, for example, you've got a certain number of credits that you have to have per year and per cycle. How does the Royal College track that, and what happens for a physician specialist if they have not met the requirements? So what happens then?
Certainly. So we have an incredible team, and in particular, 2 dedicated MLC program coordinators whose entire job it is to be there to support our physicians to track and assist them with their MLC. So we look at everything sort of on an annual basis and then on a cohort basis. And what we mean by cohort is the group that shares a similar 5-year cycle. So if your cycle ends, we're in 2023 now, so if your cycle ends December 31st, 2023, you'd be part of the 2023 cohort. So we look at supporting on that annual basis to ensure that physicians have the 40 credit requirement. And we do that through our main party portfolio. So that's where our members are recording their CPD. And we're collecting stats, we have reports associated with that, and we're looking at everybody who needs to report their 40 credits in 2023, and then we're looking at those who are going to be with their cycle ending. So we're generally sending out emails. We're often making support calls. We have our dedicated Royal College Services Center that any of our members can call at any time to get information about the MOC, their status in MOC, if they're having confusion about how to use the framework. So that's generally how we track throughout the year. We'll look at the stats. We pull them obviously over and over again to see the change, and reach out to those who may not have recorded their activities or their credits yet, just to make sure that they're not falling behind, and also to check in, because we recognize that healthcare is a very, very difficult place to work right now, and it's really not just right now, but over the last few years and even before the pandemic. So we want to make sure, are you doing okay? Are you on a leave that we don't know about? Can we make sure that we make those exceptions for you? Have you actually been doing a ton of CPD and just not had a chance to record it? So we really want to be partners in that and a support service. So when physicians are, if you're having difficulty with meeting your requirements, we certainly try to do everything we can to support you in that. There's lots of reminders. There are extensions available, if you need to take a leave for whatever reason that may be. And then there is an opportunity when you come to the end of your cycle, there is an opportunity to back report. So there can be a bit of an extension. If life happens, if it just happens that you actually have all that CPD, you just need a little bit of extra time, we'll often offer that. Again, if something else has happened in your life, then we look at what the options are there. The kind of end of the road scenario after there's been many, many calls and supported emails is that you can be at risk of having your fellowship removed if you're non-compliant with MOC. So that means that you're no longer able to use your designation, and that for the purposes of your license, depending on what province or territory you're in, that you may, you will need to let them know that it's been removed and you need to be reinstated. So there is always a process to come back and continue to use the MLC program, and we certainly try not to get to that point. Consistently year over year, we're at less than 1% of our membership that are removed.
Yeah, I think the overall message there is going to be reassuring to people, because certainly I heard the word support time and time again and that the Royal, I think a lot of physicians are concerned that if I don't meet my MOC, I'm going to lose your fellowship status.
Oh,
And
Lord.
while that might be true at the end of a very, very, very long line, it sounds like the Royal College takes a lot of effort to support people to make sure they're able to get their CPD done, that they're able to get their CPD logged into their main port site. And that really it's an approach that is helpful for physicians rather than one that should be threatening to physicians.
Absolutely. Thanks for saying that, Bill. I appreciate you calling that out. We definitely, I mean, our mandate is to be there in support of learning and to be a partner with the other organizations that physicians need to work with and report to. We understand that we're not the only organization out there. You have your licensing body, you have your hospital privileging. So we really just want to be there in support and service of you as you do your CPD and do those things that support you in delivering the best care for patients. At the end of the day, we're all going to be patients at one point or another. So whatever we can do, in our role to support that, to support physicians in delivering care and being well, obviously, in themselves is what we're aiming to do.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that because of the mandatory requirement from regulatory authorities, a lot of people can mistakenly view the Royal College as a type of a regulatory body where it's not. It's a body that's there to assist specialists in their education, and so I think that the fact that it's not an organization that is trying to or not helping physicians, specialist physicians on a regular basis will help to allay a lot of those misconceptions.
Certainly, yeah.
You mentioned you're not the only organization out there, right, offering supports. And I was wondering, are you ever working specifically with the College of Family Physicians of Canada, because they also have requirements for family physicians? Do you ever try to harmonize the requirements and line those requirements up?
100%. So we actually work really closely with them, and I've been really fortunate in my roles at the Royal College to get to know their CPD team in particular. So I just will take an opportunity to give a shout out to my family physician CPD colleagues, because they're a wonderful group, and we really appreciate working with them. So we do a lot of staying connected. We are, we're revising our MLC program at this time. So they have been an incredible partner for us in looking at what have they done with their MainPro Plus program over the years. How is that working? What kind of stats are they seeing? And then with respect to accreditation, of course. So that's, I think, for those who are perhaps wearing, might be physicians, but also physician and administration will be familiar with some of the accreditation pieces. And we know that can be a bit of a tricky issue sometimes when you're trying to accredit using both two systems. So we work really closely, on the national standard, which provides guidance around organizing activities when there's involvement, when there's sponsorship involvement or industry involvement. We work really closely on that with them, and we continue to work closely on how we might harmonize our standards.
So one of the things that one of the reasons why we wanted to have this episode was because there was some rustling in the leaves that we heard that perhaps there are some changes coming up to the MOC program. It's been the way it is right now for a few years, and I understand that some changes are in the works, not yet approved by council, I don't think. But maybe you can give us a little sneak peek about what some of the changes might be and how they might impact physicians in practice.
Absolutely. So the rustling you've heard is in fact true. We've been spent the last couple of years really focusing on how we can revise the program. So it's been actually over a decade since we last made major changes to the MOC program. So we're well due for that. So we did, I'd just like to share a bit about the process, if it's okay. We definitely checked in with our members. We held over 40 co-design sessions with members, with patient partners, with our other organization partners to say, what would you like to see? How can we improve? And with the focus, the focus on quality improvement, we see our continuous quality improvement. We're seeing that a fair bit in CPD and the CPD literature and the MRIs. We really wanted to walk the talk and do our own CQI. So we're very excited to be taking our revised framework to our council in June. And some of the sneak peek pieces I can share with you now are that we're, first of all, looking to decrease the number of credits. So pretty significantly, so almost by half, actually, for
No, I don't think anyone will complain about that.
No, I don't think so. We're hoping that'll be well received. So we're looking at 250 credits per 5-year cycle. So that would align with what CFPC does. It also aligns with most of the other CPD systems around the world. We're also looking at removing some of the mandatory credits for Section 1 and Section 2, or rather removing them altogether, and just having mandatory in Section 3, which is all around assessment. And then with the framework itself, we've really tried to make it far more reflective of what specialist physicians are doing in practice. So after these co-design sessions, we took everything we heard and tried to bring it into the framework. So Section 3 in particular, which focuses on assessment, we've really expanded that considerably to look at CQI, to look at feedback received, how physicians improve their own practice, how they participate in systems improvement. So we're hoping that when folks are approaching the framework now, that they're seeing themselves and their meaningful learning reflecting in it, rather than being, a square hole that they need to fit themselves into. So that's a bit of what we're hoping to do. And we will be having a brand new learning platform to be going along with that. So we're in the process of designing that now, and we'll certainly be working with our members to make sure that it's reflective. For us, this is a very collaborative co-design process and also a CQI process.
So do you have a specific or a general timeline in terms of, you mentioned that June Council will be reviewing this. When do you hope to implement? When could a specialist expect to see these changes being communicated to them?
Absolutely. So our hope is 2024, and I'm going to keep that as a broad date right now, just because we have, obviously, with the technical pieces, we've got a few things to confirm around that. But we'll be communicating out with our members over the course of the year, and we may be looking at what we can implement even earlier to, again, address the burnout and some of the burden that's happening in medicine right now. How can we support from a learning perspective? So definitely 2024. So stay tuned for that. But certainly look this year for more information about where we're headed. And obviously for any specialist physicians out there, if you're interested in being involved and being part of this new platform design, we welcome your input. So don't hesitate to contact us.
I think that's a shameless plug. I think that's good.
But it is exciting with the Section 3 changes and the ones and twos kind of changing a bit. I am interested in what changes related to what we've noticed. We've noticed people aren't that interested in taking conferences as much, but we certainly have had a huge uptake in asynchronous learning. Does that show up in your new program?
Absolutely. So we have seen the same thing. Our data, particularly obviously over the pandemic, showed a major uptick in everything related to self-learning and online learning. So we've made sure that those, especially those asynchronous opportunities, are clearly reflected in the framework. That's part of the reason that we're removing those requirements also on Section 1. So right now, in our current framework, the requirement is to have 25 credits per section per cycle. But for our new framework, we'll be removing that for Section 1 and Section 2. Section 1 predominantly because we know the world is different now. People aren't necessarily going to in-person conferences, or they're going, in a hybrid fashion, or they're listening after. So we really wanted to put the focus on Section 3 and the assessment and what's happening there. And that's also recognizing again how perhaps less from the online, Leslie, but how the world has changed, right? We know that there was so much rapid change that needs to happen through COVID, so many adjustments day to day even. So recognizing all that work that needs to happen there, and that you might be doing instead of going to that conference because you're needed in the hospital or in your clinic. So that's one of the major ways that we've really adjusted and tried to make sure that online learning is highly valued. And we are also looking at our accreditation standards, looking to make sure that they in no way preclude that online learning from being properly accredited where it needs to be.
One of the things that I've harped on about quite a bit over the years is the concept of point-of-care learning. Because it's my belief that that some of the most powerful learning that we do is the learning that we do with the patient at our side. When we don't know something, or we have to phone a friend or look something up and we learn something, that we then immediately implement change into our practice. That's point of care learning, and that's powerful because we're making change in the moment. But it's always been a challenge to try and record that type of learning, that point of care learning, into Mainport, despite the fact that it's probably the most powerful type of learning we do. So is there a way that the new MOC will recognize that point of care learning and help people to, I think the other challenge is help physicians to understand that the stuff that they do every single day that helps them to make changes in their practice is actually a type of continuing professional development.
Absolutely, Bill. I'm so glad that you highlighted that, because that was one of the things that we had a sense of from having heard from our members previously. And when we did the co-design sessions, we heard that over and over. We heard people say, I had a 10-minute hallway conversation after seeing a patient. I talked to one of my peers, and that actually changed my practice. I changed what I did from that 10-minute hallway conversation. So that was a huge, huge piece of the new framework. So what we've tried to clarify in there is to have more examples, far more examples of what point of care learning looks, how that looks when you think about CPD. So have those examples and clearly show this is where you can record them. We've also developed essential guidance for quality improvement. So to reflect that quality improvement doesn't need to be something that you do outside of your sphere of care or away from the patient. It can be something that happens right in the moment, and it can even be something that's related to your well-being. So we've done that within Section 3, and of course Section 2 as well, that's capturing that when you might be looking up something quickly and adjusting based on that. So we've tried to make sure that the framework really reflects that through the types of activities we're indicating you could record, as well as the number of examples and the support tools that go with it. And then the complementary piece will be the technology. So our specialist physicians will be familiar probably with our Mainport app. When the app was developed, it's hard to believe, but when the app was developed and launched back 2014, 2015, apps were not actually as quite a big a thing as they are now. So again, it's taken on a whole life of its own. And to be honest, we haven't kept up. So with our new platform, what we're really looking for is a responsive, either an app that is complementary to it, or a responsive design, so that all of the features that you're getting if you're logging into your desktop are going to be available on your phone. So knowing that our phones are ubiquitous now, I think we're probably almost never without them. We want to make sure that point of care learning, supporting our specialists in developing that reflex. So if you are seeing your patient, learning occurred during that moment, you step out into the hallway or you have your lunch break, you pull out your phone, you're able to put that in super quickly and it's done. You don't have to save it for later. You're not waiting until you can log into your computer. And we're also hoping that we can support that even more by automating as many credit and activity recording opportunities as possible. So whether that's in partnership with your hospital, with your MRA, with your with any other organizations that you're working with, how can we get that in? So maybe if you're inputting point of care learning in another system, you're able to transfer it over seamlessly to your learning platform. So a few different areas that we're looking to do that.
I think that's great. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is helping physicians see what they already know. And when you talk to a group of physicians about this concept, they say, well, yeah, that's exactly how I change my practice. I don't change my practice by reading a journal or by going to a conference necessarily, but I change it day to day based on input from peers and based on my experiences with patients, and helping them to understand that is the powerful learning is one of the first challenges. So having the Royal College have the ability to allow us to capture those things, I think is going to be awesome going forward.
So as you know, our podcast is about helping physicians change practice. So you certainly have highlighted a lot of points. Do you have any tips for us that our listeners can hang their hats on related to their CME and how effectively they can plan, learn, and implement it in the future?
Absolutely. So I think that I hope what physicians will be pleased to learn is that the Royal College, we CFPC, we the CPD community are really trying to work closely together so that you're not hearing different things from different organizations. So the MRAs, as you may be aware, many of the licensing authorities are going towards a greater focus on QI as part of licensing requirements. So we're really trying to partner around that and say, okay, we know you need to do this for your license. We know you need to do this for your MOC. Here's some tools that you can use. So we have our essential guidance for QI. So one of the tips I would say is, if you're not familiar with QI, or if you're just looking for some ideas around it, that we have some tools available there. So thinking about the fact that, Bill, as you pointed out, this happens every day in your practice. It may be normal and routine to you, but remember, every time that you're making an improvement, every time you're looking to provide better patient care, you're probably doing QI. So having that in your mind at all times to be able to then recognize it, input it, record it right away. The other piece I would say is thinking about, in so much as possible, what your one intention or your focus might be for whatever period of time feels manageable for you. So whether that's on a monthly basis, whether it's a yearly basis, maybe it's for your entire cycle that you want to focus on something. And perhaps, for many physicians right now, it might be your own wellness and health and well-being. That's also CPD. You're also doing learning in there that is CPD. And then finally, I would say, rely on your community and your network. We had the great pleasure and privilege to speak to so many folks who are doing incredible things, and they're doing incredible things across the country, sometimes with very little. Sometimes, it's figuring out that they needed to put a sign on a door, and that was game changing. A sign on a door is, a laminated piece of paper. It wasn't high tech. But I think the more that we share those stories, and the more that we're connected throughout all of the levels of healthcare, the physicians together, I think that there's something that in the learning that happens there that it is beyond anything that we could put, in an article or in a book. So I would say connect to your peers and reach out, and don't hesitate to share those stories and ask for support when you need it, whether it's from your peers in your work setting, or from your peers who work in the Royal College.
Well, Kate, that's great. I really want to thank you for joining us and sharing with us your experience and your wisdom and your insights from your involvement at the Royal College. I'm sure that a lot of the points that you've made will be helpful to specialist physicians and all physicians in terms of helping them to plan, implement, and make change to their practice. So thank you for giving us something to hang your hat on, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you again for having me.
Well, that was really interesting. What did you learn?
Well, did we solve the debate between CME and CPD?
I don't think that debate will ever be solved.
No. But it was mentioned numerous times CPD, but sometimes CME. So we'll just keep it with both.
We'll keep it with both. Yeah. And I do acknowledge that CME can include things that are non-medical, obviously. So learning about professionalism, communication skills, those sorts of things. But I still think that most physicians in practice will refer to it as CME. But anyway,
yes,
that's a debate.
But certainly well-being was highlighted, and wellness, that could be included.
Absolutely.
I liked that there was more quality emphasis now over quantity. I liked that in the changes.
So what can we hang our hat on here? What do you think that what messages we should be sending out to the listeners in terms of things we can hang our hat on?
Well, certainly the community aspect, right? And we do try to encourage that in the education and training.
Right.
So
I think that's very powerful. We learn from each other more than we learn from anything else. And as a practicing physician, I absolutely know that most of the changes that I've made in my practice over time have been through either observing or input from colleagues or people that I respect. So I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. But you do need to somehow capture that as well.
Yeah. The other thing is that the Royal College is working collaboratively with other organizations to ensure that there's some alignment between what everyone is trying to do. And I think that that's very reassuring. Anything
And
else?
then they're also then following through on their community views,
Right.
that they're reaching out to not just their community, extending the community.
Right. And then the last thing that I heard was, which was a great piece of advice, which is do some planning in terms of what you want to learn. So what is your intention, I think is what she said. What is your intention in terms of what your learning goals are? Keep it broad. So it might be well-being goals. It might be medical content knowledge goals. But write down your intentions, or really just take a few minutes to figure out what your intentions are in terms of your CPD over the next period of time. Make it much easier for you to attain those goals if you set out in advance what they are.
Yeah, I think those are some really good things to hang your hat on.
You've been listening to The Hat Rack, hosted by Dr. Bill McCulley and Leslie McAdam from Continuing Professional Development at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. Technical assistance for The Hat Rack is provided by Patrick Barfoot, Technology Support Specialist at Schulich. Original music was composed by Cameron Beresnick. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics or guests. We can be contacted by email at thehatrack, that's all one word, THEHATRACK, at uwo.ca. Additional episode information can be found online at www.schulich.uwo.ca/CPD. For The Hat Rack, I'm Stephanie Giberson-Kirby, Faculty Development Specialist at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, leaving you with something to hang your hat on.